And I'm Michelle Dubey.
And we are joined here with Dr. Wirth. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Wirth.
Thanks for having me.
It's such an honor to be spending this time with you. You wrote a chapter in the textbook, ABA, in the Humanity of ABA. Can you talk to us a little bit about the idea for the topic and some of the key concepts that you wanted to convey in your chapter?
Yeah, it feels like ABA as a science is often misunderstood, and there's a lot of misinformation about it. And so part of it is around correcting that misinformation, and it seems like the heart of it is, where do the intentions of the science and where do the intentions of the practitioners lie? And sometimes, so a lot of that misinformation is in the autism community, where there's been discussions, and we were talking a little bit right before this about how polarizing some of those discussions are, where people have the perspective that ABA is abusive and practitioners are arguing no, it isn't. And we decided to take a look at, what do we do, and what are our intentions as a science, and what are our intentions as practitioners. Um, and so we decided to take the position of talking about the humanity of ABA.
It's fantastic and so necessary to bring two polarizing sides potentially closer together, which is so important and is necessary. One, to inform the science, and two, to be able to disseminate and demonstrate the need of behavior analysis across multiple disciplines throughout the world. Can you share some of the points that you made with respects to ABA and the humanity of the science?
Yeah. I think that the overall scope really covers that, while the intention of our science is to achieve maximum outcome with the minimum efficiency, basically, or have the most efficiency with the minimum amount of work, whatever's going to be the most effective. That's what the science is about. And as the application of it, the applied part is about how do we do that and make life better for our clients or for humanity in general. So we looked at, what do we do as a science? And of course we went back to the original tenets of behavior analysis as defined by Beowulf and Risley, and kind of use that as a jumping off point. um, Most importantly, it's about evidence-based practice. We want to make sure that what we're doing is effective, and we know it's effective because there is a lot of evidence to support it, and it meets kind of the requirements for really being able to solidly demonstrate that. But also that we are taking that evidence and we're individualizing it. So it's not that we have a cookie cutter approach for anybody. That we're meeting with um, a team often, for little kids anyways. As individuals get older, we're meeting with the individuals and their support people, or sometimes just individuals. um, and we're really taking their goals and their desires and their long-term dreams, and we're thinking about how can they achieve that, how can we help them achieve that, how can we do it in the best, quickest way possible, with the least restrictive, least aversive strategies possible. How do we help them get that level of self-determination and self-advocacy, and independence? And those are the core things that we like when we sat down and talked about this. That's what we all really want for our clients, is we want them to be as fully functioning, as fully independent in the world that they want to be a part of, that they can, so that they can advocate for themselves as much as possible, so that we're not making decisions on their behalf. That they can make decisions on their own about, and communicate that in whatever way that they can possible. And that we're, using not just effective strategies to teach it right now, but how are we going to make sure that it's trapped in, that it maintains and it generalizes to their life.
It's
I feel like I'm
fantastic.
ranting quite a bit there,
No,
so.
it's fantastic and so important, and it's so necessary to hear those words. With that being said, there are criticisms against not the field of ABA, but practitioners within the field of ABA that do use more of a cookie cutter approach, that use their own learning history and make programs or decisions based on assessment or their own learning history, or like what has worked with previous clients, and not necessarily individualizing it, as you so wonderfully stated earlier. What are some of the skills, or what are some of the ways that we can provide um, practitioners with the ability to be a behavior analyst that really does like kind of take the time to invest in understanding the client's family, the client's environment, and really develop a program that allows for that level of autonomy as an outcome?
There's a couple different directions that I could go in with with answering that question, I think. And one direction is do what we do best and be data informed. So, you use our data, even if it's informal data, and oh, God forbid we use informal data, but we can do that. We can do a behavioral assessment by collecting verbal information. But try to use that data to suggest what direction to go in. Is what you're doing working? Is it working fast enough? Are you seeing any progress? If you're not seeing any progress with the data, then you haven't individualized enough and you need to. So these are the things that are kind of like in core to any behavior analytic training in any program. So I think staying true to that is really, really important. But also the other direction that I was thinking about is, what do our clients want for the long term? Like, what are their long term desires and goals? Like, and if it's not the individual and we need to talk with the parents, what are their long term goals? And then how do we work backwards from that to figure out what's the starting point? What can we do to help that client, with the base prerequisite, so that they can at least start that, use a task analysis, break down that goal into whatever steps we need to see where can we start for this person, and how do we build from that. So it's really sometimes even in the planning and doing that ongoing. So something I've seen a lot, is I used to work at Saint Amant, which in Manitoba is a large institution that is providing a lot of intervention for children and individuals with autism and developmental disabilities. And so I worked with a lot of different consultants behavioral consultants in their programming. And so we use the ABLES, which is the Assessment of Basic Language and Learning Skills, which a lot of behavior analysts use as kind of like an assessment tool and a curriculum guide. And something that I've seen people make as a rookie mistake, and sometimes not even as a rookie, is to look at like, oh, the client mastered the skill B12 and in visual performance, and so we're going to teach B13, and then we're going to teach B14, and we're going to keep going up, instead of continuing to look across the continuum and the spectrum of the child's day-to-day life, and kind of taking, trying to step back and look at that big picture at least every so often, to say they got a lot of skills in visual performance and like nothing in play, or they can't ask for things. Like, we got to look across what is going to be functional and affect their everyday life the most, and how do we, make sure that we're looking across the spectrum of that individual's life to teach them what's really the most important, instead of just focusing on, now they've mastered this, so we go up to this. So it's a continuous assessment, basically.
One of the things that just showed up for me as you were talking about that, I think a lot of it comes down to scope of competency, really. So many of us, we get our supervision in one area, right, with maybe like one age group. or like we start in early intervention and then we kind of maybe go up to like middle school-ish, and then we kind of forget about the teenage years and adulthood. And so there's not that full understanding of the trajectory of skills that are needed, or like the prerequisite skills that are needed for those later vocational skills. And so I think, what you just said about how instead we tend to train up instead of looking across.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we were able to broaden our training and our supervision experiences, I feel like some of that could be mitigated, right? Just through experience. Maybe you don't have to have 20 years of experience working with little guys and then 20 years of experience working with adults before you can figure that out. But if you have just, you make some rounds, basically, you get a broader understanding. And I think that's where some of us are really fortunate in having those more expansive experiences. And we are a little less cookie cutter, right? Because we're thinking about that. And I get it. It's very easy, I'm sure, for some people to fall clinician, right? But it's their learning history. You kind of mentioned that before too. It's sort of what they've been, how they've been brought up in the
Yeah.
field. So,
Yeah.
and scope of competency is like that's a whole other conversation for a later date and time. But that was just something that showed up for me, because I think the people that you see who do have that wider lens, usually do have that broader experience, or they're willing to learn. They're more open to investigating some of that stuff.
I think what you're hitting on is those are all things that are in our code of ethics, basically. So if you're following the code of ethics and you make sure you're knowledgeable about what they are, then you know that if, let's say, you're moving on to a 12-year-old and you've only worked with 3-year-olds, that you might want to, consult with some other people who are experienced in that area. You want to see, look into the research on what, if there are curricula that anyone uses, if they're, and then consult with the other people. I don't remember where I had learned this, but there was someone, and it might have been like Bobby Newman or somebody like that, who came and I attended a conference one time where they were talking about transition planning or lifespan planning, and a good rule of thumb is 10 years ahead. So like, where do you see this individual in 10 years? So if you're talking about a middle schooler that, and if they're a middle schooler and they are, very close to typically developing, and they're just, there's no IEP, there's no specialized programming, and you're doing something a little different, social skills or whatever, maybe you don't need to do this. But if you're talking about somebody who has more needs and maybe would be on an IEP, then the idea is to sit with the team and the individual and see, where are you going to be in 10 years? Because how do you even know what educational program to go into from there? Or are we looking at like a recreation program? Are we looking at college? Like, what are we looking at in 10 years? Because then that is what guides your trajectory. That's what guides all the different things that you have to look at for that individual, and all the considerations to have. And most parents don't know, or family members, caregivers, whatever, they don't know to think about that so early. And high schools also don't really do that. Like, like here anyways, that planning is done usually when the child is about 17. And in my opinion, it's not like it's too late ever, but like that's a bit late. Like, that should be started a lot earlier to guide what they're doing in school, and what kind of extracurricular things they're doing. So I like that guideline, 10 years ahead, and then thinking backwards from there.
It's so helpful. So you shouldn't be seeing any shape sorters in high schools then, right?
I don't know. I mean, if you're teaching them to load a dishwasher or put cutlery away, I suppose that could be a base step, but then you might just use cutlery.
Yeah, it's great, but like again, like it needs to be functional, and it goes back to our initial conversation of like kind of really learning the environment and what's applicable and what's important for the autonomy of the client. So valuable, so important, and necessary. And like you said, it's not. This isn't rocket science. This is the field. This is what it should be. This is in the ethical code. Like we need to individualize programming. Period. Like kind of it's pretty explicit. So thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to share? Any resources? Anything that you've been up to that you can point us in that direction?
You gave me a bit of a heads up to think about that, but I didn't really. One thing that could be helpful, especially for younger kids, is I do have this book, How to Get Your Child to Go to Sleep and Stay Asleep.
Oh,
it's been in ABAI's bookstore for several
years. Link. That's great. Tell us a little bit about it.
And I've written it as how to. It's basically like a behavioral plan of how to implement in each procedure and when to use it and what to do if this and that happens, and what are considerations to have and what add-ons you can do and things like that. So that was a project that came out of having my own children and looking for resources and reading through the books that the pediatricians recommended that never really told you how to do it. And then I was like, well, that's dumb, Kirsten. Go look at the literature like you would do for anything else. So that's what I did.
How did that work for you?
I mean, that's what we do in our everyday work. So obviously it was super effective.
There we go.
But that's how I wrote the book, though, for parents who wouldn't know, how do I go to the literature and review what the research says and, what to do and how to do it and what if this happens and things like that. So that's why I did that.
That's awesome. We'll throw that up there.
Should also put in a plug for ASAT. The Association for Science and Autism Treatment. Anytime I'm talking to people involved in the care of anybody with autism, I refer them to the ASAT website. So asatonline.org. There's such great information and resources. There's a regular newsletter. There's a clinical corner. There's frequently asked questions. There's a little video and a manual for parents of recently diagnosed children. We're working a lot on resources for planning for the lifespan. So it's not just, you don't grow out of autism just because you're not little anymore. So now what do you do? Transition planning. What kinds of treatments are evidence-based and what aren't, updates on the research in those areas. So it's just such a great resource.
Amazing. Oh, this is so wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Post, and thank you for your chapter, and continue doing such great work.
Thanks.
Thank you.